Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another training. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon for this another session of training, which is being supported by Eduardo Mondlane. I can see my professor is already here to give us some welcoming remarks. Our facilitators are also here. So let me give an opportunity to our host, who is Professor Rogerio, to give us some few opening remarks before we start the training. Professor Rogerio, over to you.
Prof, you're muted. Prof, you're muted.
Thank you, Dr. Nyararo, and thank you, Rufaro, for this collaboration that we're having to deliver this short course to our African brothers and sisters. And I would like to thank you also to facilitator for this activity that they are doing, putting all efforts to make sure that our Africa can become better. As the other course that we offered, we designed this course because we understand the skill gaps in terms of academic writing skills. So we want to contribute to some improvements in terms of providing these trainings. So please make sure you get the best that the facilitator can provide in terms of learning how to academically communicate to other scientific world. I would like to request you to, when you fill the attendance list, you put the name as it is, as it should be. I've been receiving complaints that the name that comes to certificates is not the way how it was supposed to be. But I think that it happened because the way how you write your name when you are putting the attendance list, the way that the certificates are filled. And also, I would like to recognize that we have been having a problem, in terms of delivering the certificate in short time. But we have to understand that there's a lot of people which are attending, and as a lot of people, it takes some time to have the certificate being issued. But they will be issued for all of you that you are attending the course. So please understand us. I have seen a lot of complaints in the group of WhatsApp, people saying that they are taking so long, but you have to understand that there's a lot of people attending. With this, I would like to invite you take this opportunity to learn as much as this course is being delivered. And thank you very much for again joining us to learn in these academic writing skills at this engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for these welcoming remarks. I would like to inform the participants that, yes, we are going to send the registration link as we are proceeding with the training to ensure that everyone registers their attendance. And please note that we only provide certificates to people who have attended the training for the 5 days. So if you have missed the training, then it will be difficult for us to give you the certificate. And also, we also encourage you to put your questions in the question and answer section in this webinar. And then we also want to let you know that this session is being recorded live on YouTube. We shall also share with you the YouTube link so that you can always go back to the training and see with the sessions which would have missed. So we are going to share with you all the necessary information, and I'm very sure the facilitators also will also share with us the training materials that we'll be able to share with you in due course. So let me take this opportunity to call upon our facilitators, Professor Tenywa and Dr. Nampala. Professor Tenyo and Dr. Nambala, over to you. Dr. Nampala, are you there?
Yes, I am here and very pleased to be back.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we are back yet again for academic writing skills. We had a very good session the other week when we were dealing with thesis proposal development. And friends on call, we've already been introduced, but we would like to say that academic writing is very, very important because you cannot be a complete scholar without communicating your scholarship. And this communication of scholarship exhibits in many respects. One of them is to write, but in many faculties and schools and departments, students are also required to do oral presentations. And that too is academic communication. For this workshop, virtual engagement, we are focusing ourselves on writing skills. And we are happy to start it off with the basics in journal publishing. Even for writing skills, we're going to focus on journal publishing because we think that as young scholars, this is what you should be thinking about, and not any other publishing. For this workshop in particular, or write shop, we think that as we go along the journey of the 5 days, we shall be able to demystify the process of preparing manuscripts for publication among researchers. As you know, it's not the case that all scientists are well published. Some scientists are highly published, others are not. And one of the reasons why some scientists are not very well published is because there is fear of publishing, or fear of putting manuscripts out there such that they are assessed, and once they are viewed for quality, then they are published. And this is why we are using the word demystify, remove that fear. And we hope that by the end of the workshop, participants will go in the process that we have engaged, and maybe even after the 5 days, some of you will be having draft manuscripts. I have purposed with myself that by the end of this interaction, myself and Jess, we should have a publication that is from some of the data, some of the interactions that we've had, and so on and so forth. But the other objective is to enhance skills in scientific and technical writing, to enable young scholars like you on call, because we were told that largely this workshop is masters and PhD students. So we're calling you young scholars. And the international definition of a scientist by ICSU, the International Council for Scientific Unions, is that a young scientist is that scientist within a period of 10 years after completion of PhD. Now, the implication is that if you're 60 years and you've not done your PhD, and then you will now complete your PhD at 60, then from 60 to 70, you will still be a young scholar. So 10 years after completion of a PhD, you're a young scholar. So I think this definition is very generous and it covers all of us. But what we want is that these young scholars are equipped with skills to publish research manuscripts in quality peer-reviewed journals. Somebody said the other day that quality cannot be high. Quality is quality. But of course, because we are not English speakers, we always make that mistake. High quality peer-reviewed journals. But there is nothing like high quality. Quality is quality or less of it. So we hope that by the end of this workshop, the preparation of manuscripts will be demystified, but then skills will be enhanced, and that young scholars will be able to publish manuscripts in high quality, in quality peer-reviewed journals. As scientists, as academicians, we like definitions, and we would like to kick this off with some definitions. There are some words that we normally simply speak, and even the lay person will pick it up, but when the meaning of it is not what it says. I have always said in workshops, somebody says, can we just peruse? When you look for the definition of peruse, when you look for the definition of peruse, it is actually thorough reading. But now somebody says, can we peruse through? Can we simply peruse through? So instead they mean they scanned through the document. But if you say you perused, then we expect thorough understanding of what you did. So sometimes we speak words that have come as jargon and we don't understand what they are saying. But friends, English language is very interesting. And some of the words and the epistemological engagement of the words, how they started, is that it combines two words in one. Common and unity, you get community. So likewise, public and location, you get publication. So a publication is that thing which you can find which you can locate in the public. That piece of writing which can be located in the public. It could be a piece of writing, it could be an art, it could be music, it could be. So that I published my music. I published my art gallery. I published, so that which has been developed based on head knowledge and designed and is now locatable in the public is called a public location. Yeah, that we can locate it in the public, by the public, for the public, with the public. So it's a publication. Now, when it comes to journal publication, it is that knowledge, that body of knowledge that we can locate in the public, but is packaged following scientific procedures and rigorous processes. And those rigorous processes, we know it is a peer-reviewed, is a review, and it follows a process that is scholarly, and that scholarly process has a method, and that method follows procedures, and then it qualifies to be a journal publication. Now, not anything can be a journal publication. Yeah, and this can be sometimes very confusing. There are bulletins, there are monographs, there are newspapers, so now when you come to journal publication, there is a divide, and in scholarly writing, this is very, very tight. So journals have particular characteristics, and you can look at those characteristics based on how this has been laid out. There is a layout, there is a systematic way of how things are done. And this has been developed over time since the first journal. You know, the first journal, I don't know whether some of you know that the Philosophical Transactions is the very, very first journal that was developed way back in the 16th century when the British monarch was communicating. And it would be interesting to look at the Philosophical Transactions then and how they have now moved to this point. But still, even as you look at those letters that were being written in the British monarch, you see that they were following a certain rubric, certain rules, that there are paragraphs, there's this, and so on and so forth. That there is reference, there is even the first journal, the first publication, the Philosophical Transaction, had references, it had approaches, it had, and so on and so forth. So that rubric, that rule of writing and packaging has remained, and it is typical of what you call a journal publication. It's different from a monograph, different from a brochure, different from a magazine, different from a newspaper, and you can just look at it and say, yeah, this is a journal. Many journals sometimes don't carry the name journal. For example, we have I've told you an example, the Philosophical Transactions. Nature. It doesn't say Journal of Nature, it simply says Nature. There is the one in the US, the one for the national academies. And it doesn't carry the name journal. So it may not necessarily carry the name journal. It could be a bulletin, but bulletin also equals journal, something. And so on and so forth, as you already know. We are probably speaking to people that already know, and we are just starting a process to catalyze our understanding and interaction. Now, when we say manuscript, this is something that has been prepared, a scholarly piece of work that has been prepared, but is going through the process. And until it is put in public locations, that is when we call it an article. So a manuscript, strictly speaking, is a raw, something that is still raw and has not yet been published, but it's just being prepared for that process. So once it is published, then we can safely call it an article. My article in Philosophical Transactions, my article in African Crop Science Journal, my article, not my manuscript that I published. That would be wrong. But of course, we still make those mistakes. And sometimes people call articles manuscripts and manuscripts articles. Yeah. Which article are you preparing from your thesis? No. Which manuscript are you developing from your thesis? And so on and so forth. Now, an author, strictly speaking, in journal publications, an author is a contributor to this publication. And we will have time to break down on who is an author and who is not an author. So we'll have a set of slides because this sometimes causes a lot of challenges, to the extent that some articles never see the light of day, some manuscripts never see the light of day because of author conflicts and author wars. But who is an author? It is this person that has contributed. Some journals give guidelines, and some institutions, universities also give guidelines. At least 3/4, or they can speak for at least 3/4 of the article that has been published. Because if it is a field assistant, or if it is a data collection assistant, and they are put as the authors, they may not be able to explain what the science is all about. Yeah, they may not even be able to answer to review comments. So an author is this person who is able to answer and speak for this article at any point in time. Even when you wake them up in sleep, they will tell you that, yes, this was done here, the methodology was this and this. Even when there are comments tearing it apart and critique, they will be able to make it alive and say, yeah, I agree, this is what happened, but the circumstances were this and this, and the context is this, and this is what we were looking for. And what we found is that we actually were, our hypothesis was wrong, or and so on and so on and so forth. Yeah, the enumerators and the data collection assistants are paid for the work that they did. They collected data and they are paid, and their pay is considered good enough. It's not that they should make it to the author list. But then there is something we call gift authors. That I've worked with a professor in their lab, and this professor did not really engage in this work, but they are the most senior person in that lab, and it's common that every paper that gets out of that lab has the name of that director generals in the national research institutes. If you asked them, they wouldn't even know where the work was done. But sometimes research teams pick them on to please them, or to also show accountability that something is happening, because the director general launched the project, and the director general goes to the donors, EU, DFID, World Bank, to speak about research that is happening. So now the director general features somewhere. And at the end of the year, the institute has publications, and the director general is also featuring somewhere. And sometimes with this gift authorship, it sometimes explains why some articles have so many authors. You find an article, I have seen an article with 42 authors. And you say, really? These 42 explaining what? Can they all explain what happened? But sometimes it's a protocol that is being developed and a process. I think there was one from South Africa on a protocol that was developed. And indeed, these scientists were involved in the development of this protocol. Even with the Craig Venter Institute, during the gene wars, I'm sure you remember the gene wars on the human genome, when labs were competing on who publishes what and who sends out a protocol first. There were quite some articles that came out with so many authors. And yes, they all contributed to the profiling and characterization of the human genome. But it's not typical that you'll have a scientific study and then it comes up with a publication, and then you have 20 authors or something. It becomes sometimes suspect that maybe almost 3/4 of these authors cannot even explain what the article is all about, but they are the vice chancellors, they are the directors, they are the lab owners that we put allegiance to, and we want to engage them. Now, we sometimes say author to actually refer to the principal author or lead author, who is the author of this article, who is the author of this book, and the others are referred to as co-authors. But even the lead author is actually a co-author. So co-authors, if I'm not referring to myself and I'm referring to the others that I worked with and we published an article with them, and then I refer to them as co-authors. And co-authorship is also something very, very interesting. Many journals, because of this authorship wars, because we have worked at the African Crop Science Journal for quite some time, and we know a lot of inside stories. And at a time when you're ready to publish a paper, you receive a letter from a dissenting individual who says, I was part of this work, but I'm not listed on this article. Would you please include me? Now, as a journal, you can't do that. And then they don't want to disclose it to the others, their co-authors. Now, I mean, first of all, it's not acceptable. The paper has been processed, and in the process of review, the back and forth work, you've sent the corresponding author and lead author, and sometimes the corresponding author is not the lead author, and so on and so forth. So, as a policy for journals, we limit ourselves to what the corresponding authors are saying. And now you can see the reason why you need a corresponding author. Because if there is no corresponding author, then as a journal, you might end up responding to anybody that sends you instructions. But even when we respond to corresponding authors, we also make effort to copy to the other authors. So if you've not been in copy in the entire process, right from the time the article was, the manuscript was submitted through peer review processes and then sent back and forth, and sometimes there is quite a lot of interaction. As you see on articles, you say received February 2021, published August 2023, a period of more than 2 years of that process. And then somebody at the tail end of it, when the manuscript is now accepted, writes and says, you know, I am part. But even sometimes when a manuscript is accepted, the corresponding author smuggles in 3 other names that have not been part of the manuscript right from the time it has been handled. So in this case, smuggling in is open quote, close quote. They are the corresponding author. So they've given you the profile of names to include, so you include. But friends on call, I'm sure you now can see the kind of challenges that we go through just on this issue of authorship. But then you can also see why journals insist that you give the email addresses of all the authors and co-authors that are on the article, because there is a lot of correspondence that we do with each of them, sometimes individually on the side, but sometimes with all of them. Now, an editor is this person that is the gatekeeper for quality. And we have an editor-in-chief. This is the person that signs off finally and okays a manuscript to be published. And different journals have different arrangements. They have what they call section editor, or they have what they call theme editors. You know, if you look at PLOS 1, it has medicine, it has biological sciences, it has zoology. Yeah, so now you have a chief editor, but then if you have now an issue in the journal section that is for medicine, then you have the editor in charge of the medical submissions. Then you have the editor in charge of anatomy, biology. You have the editor and so on and so forth. And then below these editors, you have other editorial assistants. For example, in the African Crop Science Journal, J.S. Tenywa, professor, is the editor-in-chief. We have an editorial board, but in that editorial board, we have technical editor, we have science editor. I am the science editor. So my job is to look at the science. And many times there are manuscripts that have been accepted, but when you look at the science, then there is something that is flawed. And at that point, the paper is rejected because the science is not speaking. And this happens especially in the agriculture economics. You find that there are some variables and models that can only be done and employed when labor was part of that model. But then you find many manuscripts submitted and there is no labor as a variable, But then, so that becomes a flawed publication. You can't publish it. Yeah. Peer-reviewed, I'm sure we all know that when science is evolving and devolving, we are peers. As a professor of molecular biology, what you're talking about is what the students are talking. You're talking about mitochondria and cells and the nucleus, germplasm and what, and that's what everybody is talking about. So this is why we call it peer, the peer review. And this peer review, yes, is based on expertise, but that expertise does not also remove seniority and being junior. You can get a very good peer review from an undergraduate who is in the cytomolecular studies, just as you'll get from a professor who has spent 30 years on cytomolecular studies. So the peer review approach is like the court of science. It's like the high court of science, where cases are sorted. And these cases are sorted from innate understanding that, yes, this is what this manuscript is saying, and the scholars in this field have agreed that this is correct, and that there is an advancement in understanding on this subject. Because journals are looking for news. They don't just publish anything that was published long ago. Watson and Crick already told us about DNA and its helical strand and what. So we are now not looking for DNA and helical strands. Rather, we are looking for DNA and its application in society. Now, a peer reviewer then is this person, the scientist, in that field of study that has made their time available to give feedback and comments and a critique. You know, there is a difference between critique and criticism. Criticism is negative. Criticism is, this is horrible, this is useless, I don't know what the author and co-authors were thinking about. While a critique is a narrative that builds hope, a narrative that says, yeah, this science is taking this direction, and it has potential to contribute to the body of knowledge that exists. Nonetheless, in terms of how this is done, there were some methodological flaws, which I now list below. And I list them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when I reach the tail end and I say, now therefore, because of the above, this manuscript should not be published. Then even me as a scholar, because I'm your peer in that subject, so when I read, I actually appreciate your guidance. And I say, yes, I think this is true. We never did A, B, C, D. Yeah, and we didn't have this reagent. But given the advancement of knowledge, we should have had it, and so on and so forth. Now, an article in press, and many of us use this, is this, it has moved from manuscript. It has been accepted for publication, and the volume of the journal has been assigned already. Sometimes the page numbers are not yet assigned, but sometimes they're even assigned. Sorry about that. And what is left is for you to now put it in public locations to become publication. So this is what we call article in press. Now, sometimes you read the reference section and somebody says article in press, and it was 30 years ago, 1990, article in press. Now, an article cannot be in press forever. So you need to find out whether it was finally published or for some reason or the other, it was dropped. And it is possible that an article in press can be dropped. Yeah, because the editor-in-chief will finally see at any stage in processing manuscript, rejection is real and the reality. Once new developments come in, and new developments may mean some omissions or some methodological flaws, some ethical issues. You know, you have an article that has been lined up and is very good. It is now in press. Then you see it popping up in another journal. Then you wouldn't publish it in that journal because that is not ethical. So you cannot have articles in press forever. If anything, in press should only be for a season, less than a year, less than 3 months. Because even for journals that publish once a year, yes, they will have an article in press, but these days, a journal may be publishing in December, but by May, they have articles that have been accepted and they're already formatting. So they give the page numbers. So if it's already formatted and they've given the page number, then that is a publication. And what they do, some of these are online, they simply keep populating. So you can find a journal that publishes in December, but by September, they have some 3 articles already lined up and published. So they keep, which is one of the advantages of online publishing. Because hard copy publishing requires that you print the articles and put them together in a book. But online publishing, the articles are online. So as and when it is accepted, you upload it and it is ready for readership. And then you move to the next until you reach December when you have your total number of accepted articles and close up that issue of the journal and so on and so forth. So with the advancements in technology and advancements in publication, surely we should be having less and less of in press. There is also what we call international or local journal. And sometimes this comes with a bad taste because somebody would be wondering what is local about the journal. But just to say that international journals are journals that are wide in terms of their geographical coverage, that they receive manuscripts from all over the world, process them for publication. That when you open this journal, you will see so many articles. It is a journal in Africa, but you will see Japan, Asia, Florida, where US, British, all submitting articles to this journal. While a local journal, sometimes we like to call this departmental journals, sometimes they are very, very localized. You have a department and the department has a journal, and this has nothing to do with the quality. The departmental journal may have a lot of peer review rigor and high rejection rates. But for one reason or another, the scholars in that institution decided that it is restricted to the department. I remember in Makerere, we started what we called the MARIC Bulletin, the Makerere University Research Institute Annual Bulletin. And it was a very good journal. It evolved, a lot of peer review, until such a time the college said, but now I think we need to take this a step higher and make it a journal. And yes, indeed, there is now a journal. And I think the name changed a bit, but it is, and I think it's now inviting papers from all over the world. It's no longer that local. It's not just students and college staff. publishing in there. So that's, and this is an interesting dynamic. Probably we'll get back later to this and discuss why local versus international. But one of the issues here is, for example, colleagues in Ethiopia, you have a very rare delicacy that is rare even on the landscapes of Africa, the injera. Now, if you have a paper, the TEF, injera TEF, if you have a paper on agronomy of TEF, it will not make sense in the British Agronomy Journal. It will not make sense in the American Journal of Agronomy. In Uganda, we have the Ankole cattle, the one with the huge horns. Now, if you did, there is a lot of breeding work and gene mapping and characterization of the Ankole cattle. Now, the Ankole cattle makes a lot of sense in Uganda, but it may not make a lot of sense in Belgium or even in South Africa. So such a manuscript that is done on breeding of the Ankole cattle, and sometimes also cultures, you know, in West Africa, you have the grass cutter. Now, the grass cutter in many parts of Africa is not a delicacy. So if you send such a paper to a journal about the grass cutter and the vitamin, the elements in the grass cutter, now it would not make sense to an editor in East Africa. So this is why journals that are localized, I wouldn't like to call them really local journals, but they are localized in their scope of coverage in terms of geography, are important because they will publish scientific innovations and scientific knowledge that is useful to that part of the world. Like I said, the TEF injera in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a very populous country. Those are 100 million people. So it's quite a livelihood for these people. Now, the other thing that is also very common these days is the impact factor. And this is an interesting one, I'm sure. I would be surprised if there are not many questions on this one. But we have a lot of literature that we will share on impact factor. And just to explain is that this is really readership index. How frequently has your article that has now been published, how frequently is it being read? And there are very nice equations of how this is done, which we have some manuscripts that we have some articles that we can share, so you can follow the formula that is being used. Now, impact factor has been abused to imply quality of the journal, that because papers in this journal are being read widely, so then this journal is now a prestigious journal. No, you can actually have articles that are not good articles, but were published for one reason or another, and they have very high readership, and then the impact factor shoots up. But then the African Crop Science Journal, for example, publishes every quarter. We have an issue published every quarter. And it would be unfair to compare the African Crop Science Journal with a journal that publishes once a year, because now you can see when you beam more and more papers out there as a journal, then of course your readership will be higher than somebody who is beaming only 20 articles in a given year. So you have 4 issues, and in these 4 issues, you're putting 20 articles. By the end of the year, you have 80. Now, the other one that is publishing once a year, by the end of the year, they have only 20. So there's a lot of issues for example, the Annals of Applied Biology. They publish every 2 weeks. Yeah, so within a month, they have 2 issues published. So of course, because of the frequency of publication, they will have a very high impact factor. The readership is also high and is commensurate with the articles that are being released. Now, open science or closed access, I'm sure this those of you that have attended Berlin 10, the open access movement, I'm sure you have seen this, but open access, open data, open that articles are published and they are available to everybody. They are within the public and not locked. But there are some articles that may be within the public but are closed off. You have to pay in order to access it, or you have to go through processes of requesting for user rights in order to access that publication. So in brief, that is what is about open and closed access, but there are a lot of standard definitions about open access and open data. It's not as simple as just what we are saying. Then online versus print journal. Online journals, these are journals that go through the process, peer review, editorial checkups, due diligence, and once a manuscript crosses to becoming an article, then it is posted online, and there is no printing. For a very long time, the African Crop Science Journal was a print journal that we get printouts, but now it is totally an online journal, and many journals have gone online because of the convenience. But of course, this also comes with a lot of challenge that you must have an update database. You must have your website ready. You must. But fortunately, there are many agencies out there. I'm sure you've heard about African Journal Online, AJO. I'm sure you've heard about Scopus. You've heard those big names. They take and manage journals online. There is something we call the DOI, the Digital Objective Identifier. And this is a number that is given to your article, and it makes life easy to trace it up. Once you type the Digital Objective Identifier, because it is identifying, it will be able to pop up and show this paper. But this versus the Universal Resource Locator. So before the barcodes came, we have the Universal Resource Locator, and again the Universal Resource Locator is a what? Is a website or a link that you click to take you to this article. There is also Universal Resource Identifier, which is really the same. But talking about acronyms, in the field of publication and journal publishing, there are very many acronyms. I'm sure you've heard about APC, article processing charges. These are charges that journals peg onto an article that has been published. And before the publication, you're supposed to pay. And this ranges from $50 to above $1,000 US. So you pay for the publication. In some cases, they call it, you're paying for space. So they call it space charges, but really article processing charges. And there's also something called OCSID, the Open Research and Contributor ID, which is also becoming a very common thing these days, that a researcher worth their name and research should have an open research and contributor ID. Now, once you have this open research and contributor ID, it means that your articles are available to the public to view. They don't have to pay costs and so on and so forth. Yeah. Journal quality, I think this is very clear. It is the process, the due diligence that journals go through to ensure that they are publishing good science that is without flaws, and that it is speaks true to truth and is not forged, because this sometimes also happens. It has happened where, for example, professors in China had so many publications, but the data was not correct data, and they were scrapped their professorship. Journal guidelines. This is what a journal rolls out to guide its authors on what they should do in order to submit a manuscript or in order to make a contribution to the journal. Publication ethics or ethical conduct. This is normally specified by the journal in its guidelines, and it relates to plagiarism, falsification of results, etc. I hope we are still together. It's been quite a listing of definitions, and I'm sure there are still many more that we have not talked about. But I would like now to talk about why publish. You know, in Makerere, we have a very good adage, an old adage: publish or perish. That if you don't publish, you perish as a scientist, because we will not know your science. So publish or perish. Publish and make a name. You can imagine if Watson and Crick had not published their story of DNA, it would be only a question of time along the way. You know, a colleague of mine normally says, but research made its principle. If it had not been discovered, by now I would have discovered it. So if you don't publish what you have done, somebody else out there will actually get it published. I think we discussed a bit of this the other week when we were dealing with reference citation and so on and so forth. But our publications record can get us a job. We can be promoted at workplace. We can get higher education qualifications. We can get academic recognition. And this academic recognition may not necessarily be announcement at assemblies or in auditoriums, but it can be online, like we are now having online data capture. Google Scholar, you don't go out to put your articles in Google Scholar. Google Scholar simply picks them up as long as they are online. There is what is being now called the scientific index. You can follow up an article that you published 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and you see the citations. I know students on this platform are now going to follow us up and saying, you know, but Professor Paul Nampala, Professor John Tenyua, who are these people? So as you check, you go to Google Scholar and you will find that, yes, I have a very good H index, a very good high index, and you'll find that my research has a very good R square index, all those things, which indicates that, yes, it is impactful research, it is being read, it is being used. Some people can be very good at generating publications, but when their publications don't have citation index. So so that recognition can also be, for example, I have recognition on my Google Scholar and my ResearchGate for this high citation index, and they will normally say your research interest is 92% higher than anybody within this database. That is the academic recognition, which is good. Yeah. Now there are some general reasons for manuscript acceptance in journals, but prime among these is evidence of research news. Yeah. Why did you do this research? And we believe that at master's and PhD levels, you are really not engaging on the things that are already done. Protocols have already been developed, and now you are the grandson of so and so, and you still want to go back to what your parental line did. No. There must be news, and the new knowledge builds on old knowledge, so you can pick onto that old knowledge and build something new. Other reasons, admirable writing style. There are some people who can write. I remember there was a professor of nematology in South Africa who passed on recently, but he was called Giolome. Yes. Giolome would write, and you read an article, 10 pages, a manuscript, 10 pages, and you have nothing to edit in this article. And you know, as an editor, I sometimes would wonder, is there nothing wrong really in this article? Because most of the manuscripts we read have a lot of flaws, but you read Giolome's paper and everything is so tight. So if Giolome was not publishing, we would never appreciate and admire his writing style or even learn from it, because I kept a pile of his papers and I learned from the writing style. But we also want to ensure we are compliant with journals and the currents of literature citations that we make. Friends, we would like to move on and let's just finish. I think we would like to start about how to start. We will have a series of slides on how to start, and this is just a preamble. But some of the questions that you need to ask yourself: do you have the right set of data? And this is what we are calling publishable results. The other day when we were dealing with journals, proposals, we said that for publication of proposals, for work on proposals, you don't start with the title, you start with the problem analysis. Now, for manuscripts, the starting point is data. You know, some people write manuscripts and they write methodology, but how did you get those methods that led you to the results? So the starting point for developing manuscripts is data. The criteria for journal publication is actually presence of research news that is accepted by prime journals. And once you find that it cannot be accepted by many journals around, then that means that there's something suspect about your work. Or simply put, routine research information is not acceptable. That I got a spatula, then I mixed this and this, 5 early quotes and this. No. That is the routine work that is done in the lab. Yeah. So, yes, you can package and write, but it's normally accepted by national journals. Some of these journals that have accepted are looking for manuscripts. They publish regularly after every year, but then the scientists in the region are not contributing to them because they are not a popular journal. Their citation index is lower, and so on and so forth. When should you select a journal for your manuscript? This should be done before writing the manuscript. And it's important for you to familiarize yourself with journals as guided by the supervisors, also as guided by the university guideline. Otherwise, if you don't do this, you will develop manuscripts that will not fit into the scientific system that you are engaged with. Now, during writing, this is also very, very important that during writing, you have to pay attention to the journal guidelines. Okay? And you can do personal online search and ensure that, yes, the journal you are engaged with is actually publishing, because you can select a journal which was out of business. 1974, what? We have many examples in Africa of journals that wound up. The East African Journal of Agriculture and Forestry. A very good journal. It had very nice papers. I mean, we just can't tell what happened, but it closed up. Yeah. So you have to check this out. And when is it appropriate to write a manuscript? Yes, it is appropriate to write a manuscript when you have what to write about. If you don't have what to write about, writing will be very, very painful and you rotate in circles. And before doing research, you can write an article, literature review. And we would share a little bit about this on literature review, which is different from literature synthesis. Literature synthesis is synthesizing the literature about your challenge. But from that literature synthesis, you can write a literature review paper. And there are methods of doing this, the exclusion and inclusion theories, and so on. You can write a literature review during research. And these are becoming very common when you leave students during holiday or what, they are really writing and writing reviews. And you know, as a PhD scholar, as a master's scholar, you don't need to wait for your findings in order to have a journal article. You can actually write a review article. Yeah, and the common method that is used for this is called systematic reviews. And I'm hoping that we shall find time to look at systematic reviews. During the research, you can also write articles from the baseline. The research is going, but you can write manuscripts from the baseline studies that you've done. Short communication, sometimes we miss and misunderstand short communication to imply the length of the article. But a short communication is this publication which has very hot news before the end of the study. For example, if you're dealing with a protocol, and then you are now going to use that protocol to initiate another method, but then you've completed developing this protocol. So you write a publication about this protocol, that you've developed a new test tube, this, and it is working like this. But then that new test tube is going to be used in a lab for another process. And that process is the tail end of what we are looking for. So in other words, we don't need to wait for the tail end of things in order to publish. And as I said at the beginning, this was very common during the Craig Venter genomic human genome search, because many things were being discovered in a short period of time. And if the Craig Venter Institute was not to publish them, somebody else would, because there was another team doing research on those things. So you publish, but the story is not very complete. But then that same procedure that you developed and worked is being used and duplicated to complete the story. So that becomes a short communication. So in other words, a short communication can be as long in terms of number of pages and papers. It can be as long as an ordinary manuscript. Yeah. Now, after doing the research, we are considering all the above, not just one thing. Yeah, and for the rest of the workshop, we are going to focus on that slide. After writing the manuscript, selection of the journal sometimes becomes a dicey issue. And it enables easy switching between a journal and citation. When you select a journal after writing the manuscript, it enables easy switching. Yeah, because then you would know that the others want Vancouver, they want, so it becomes very, very easy. Friends, I think I've said so many things. And if you found it monotonous, it's a long story because there are many things that we have not even put onto the slide. But for now, I'd like to leave it at that and end there as we move on to the second point of interaction and discussion. But maybe we would like to give it a break at this point, and the break would imply that we allow for question and answer maybe for 5 minutes, because it can get monotonous with a virtual engagement that is only one way. With this, I thank you for listening. Yes, moderator, please go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Maybe you can check some questions under Q&A.
Okay.
And respond to them. A number of people who want clarification, especially related to research.
Okay, I would prefer if we can allow them talk, such that we can answer the questions directly also in the chat. But if you can allow 2 or 3 people to say something.
Maybe I can read for you the questions. Yeah, because under Q&A, there are people who asked earlier on, but they might not be able to talk again. So there is a question from Nancy, and she's saying that she's Nancy Kadenyi here from Kenya. I've been looking for such a kind of training to transform my data to journal and article, to journals, I think, an article data. Kindly help me understand, why should I consider writing publicly in the journal or a blog? Is a blog considered as a publication, and can one have it in a CV? Number 2, how do I choose an area of focus for public writing? Number 3, what are some tips for maintaining consistency in writing? Number 4, what are some common mistakes to avoid in public writing? Then number 5, she's saying, what platforms can I use for public writing? And then number 6, how do I stay updated with the trends in public writing? Then number 7, she says, would you share a sample template for one to prepare a journal? So maybe you can first respond to her, because she asked many questions before you look at the other questions also. Yeah,
this is quite engaging. It's a mouthful, but as I take a breath, I'll let my colleague, Professor JS, to respond to this set of questions. Yes. We are just changing seats. So just give us 1 minute or 2.
Okay, yeah, it is okay.
Okay, is it good afternoon or good evening?
Yeah, I think it depends on the location. Some it's afternoons, others evening, others morning.
Okay.
Yes.
Much of what has been asked will be contained in our training modules. But for number one, why should I consider writing publicly in a journal or blog? Well, for journals, we indicated the reasons why you should publish in a journal. One, to get recognition. Two, to get a job. Sometimes they will say those with publications will be given priority. To get a promotion. Now, the journal and blog has no quality associated with it, so it's not normally taken seriously compared to journals. And the rest, except maybe the last one, or second last, how do I update? How do I stay updated with the trends in publishing? Of course, like we said last time, we said good writers are good readers. So if you cannot read other people's work, there's no way you are going to improve and to stay on top of science in terms of trends, in terms of news, in terms of consistency. You have to read other people's work, and most especially the most recent articles. The rest are going to be in our modules, so you are welcome to participate in all the modules. Next.
Well, the next is from Fernando. Fernando Orlando. He's saying that related to key definitions, where can one locate an essay? Is it a manuscript or an article? That's another question. Maybe you can first answer that and then I can read another one.
An essay can also be a journal publication. Actually, journals include more than results. It can be an opinion, and if it is very exciting to the peer reviewers, to that discipline, it merits being considered as a publication. So an essay that makes, say, a lot of sense to the peer group is like a disciplinary group where that kind of article, that kind of essay belongs. If it makes a lot of sense to them and the peer reviewers advise the editor, there's no reason why it cannot be published as an article in a journal.
Thank you, Prof. And then another one is from Emmanuel Prof. He's saying that in reference to a number of authors, the presenter just mentioned, what happens to publication points if there are a lot of authors? I think he means if there are many authors, do they all get publication points? Like the example you gave of the article with the 40 authors.
Well, it's a matter of, if you have a thesis, you are going to generate many publications. So you apportion a group for a given manuscript, then another group for another manuscript, depending on their relative proportions of contribution. Because you see, if an article is to be awarded marks, that means those marks must be divided by the authors and co-authors so that each one of you takes a fraction of the marks. In the end, your contribution will be meaningless if you have very many people. But it is most unlikely that all of you are really contributing significantly to qualify to be co-authors. You probably did your contribution and you are paid off, or you might even merit to be only part of the acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you. And then another one is on please come up again on the difference between a manuscript and an article.
A manuscript is an article that, anyway, a manuscript is a draft, you can call it a draft, which has not yet been accepted. Once accepted, it becomes an article.
Okay, and then another question is that if you have about 8 authors, how do you cite them in the text for the first time? Is it allowed to use is it et al. For the first citation, or they list out all the names?
Please follow the guidelines of the journal. Don't submit a manuscript to a journal without being familiar with what they want. They will clearly spell out the do's and don'ts. And like my colleague said, it is best to select, it's best to write not specifically for a journal, rather put your ideas together first and then select a journal and fine tune the citations and references towards that journal. The reason why we do that is if you write from the beginning for a journal, you are going to be restricted in thinking. You'll be thinking about the do's and don'ts given in the guideline, rather than having a free creative mind to put together the idea and make it complete first. Then select a journal and read its guidelines, and it will be telling you the don'ts and the do's. Now,
thank you. There is also another question from Shikuku. Is asking what is the impact factor and how is it utilized in terms of academic writing?
Impact factor is one of the recent developments in journal publishing. And my colleague has already talked about it. It's based on how many times is your article being read? And for the journal, how many times, the frequency of hitting or reading the articles in that journal. So the higher the number of people interested in reading articles in that journal, the higher the impact factor will be. It is not necessarily associated with the quality. It's more to do with the readership index. But, sorry?
Go ahead. I thought you had finished. I wanted to read for you another one.
And I'm probably the last, so we can continue.
Okay. Because they are around 51 already, but it's okay. Let's the next one.
But that's a good break.
Yes, so you will respond to them later, but this one can be the last one. Thank you so much, Dr. Nampala, for your brilliant remarks. Kindly help us shed more light on the differences between a journal number, journal issue, and a journal series.
Okay. Journals have international identifiers. The first one is the serial number, because a journal is publishing in a series. It is given a number, which is called the
ISSN.
ISSN, yes. ISSN, which is International Standard Serial Number. Now, that used to be for the print journals, but now for the online journals, we use EISSN, Electronic International ISSN, International Standard Serial Number. So each book has its own number. Whether hard copy or online, it has its number. And then, what's the other one? Then the book has articles inside, and each article has a DOI. DOI is associated again with the electronic searching, so that you don't go wrong when searching for that particular article. And the DOI is allocated to the journal, and then the secretariat is the one that gives numbers to each of the articles contained in the journal. I don't know. Okay, then in publishing, a journal is published a number of times a year. It can be one, it can go up to, I don't know how many, 50 times a year. Now, each time it is being published, each time the book is being published, we call that an issue. So in the year, you might have several issues of a journal, but together per year, those issues make what we call a volume. So volume 1, issue 1, volume 1, issue 2, issue 50, all those are within 1 year. Okay, so we have a volume which is associated with a year, and then inside the volume there are issues. Issues means it's like a small booklets published every time. Every time there's a booklet published. Now, all those booklets are compiled together to form one volume, which is per year. And it can be online or it can be in print copies. I don't know whether I've answered clearly your question. Yeah. Hello? Hello?
Yes, it is okay. Please, you can now go ahead. Since you said that was the last question, you can now move ahead. You will respond to the rest in the chat. It is they are already in the Q&A.
Okay.
Okay, we are just trying to load another presentation.
Definition.
Sorry, we are loading a presentation. Just bear with us shortly. I think you can be started. It's the second one, number 2. Okay. So, computer is a bit slow.
Okay, so which one? This one. Okay, members, today being the starting day, we thought we should give preambles to the whole thing so that all of us are on the same plate. So before you get started, you need to give genuine answers to the following questions and be very truthful to the answers you give. Okay. So the first question I think you need to ask yourself, do you know for whom you are writing this paper? The kind of people you expect to read this paper. Don't just start writing for the sake of it. Rather, envision who is going to read this paper. And usually it is people in your discipline. So the beauty of it is that what your interests are tend to be their interests. So you cannot write a bad paper for yourself. Rather, what you call bad is what they also call bad. And most of what you know is what they already know. Probably even they know more than what you know. So the driver here should be the news you want to tell them that will inspire their interests to read your paper. Okay, so can you anticipate their interests and disinterests? Yes, because you are from that discipline, therefore you should be knowing what is good and what is bad. Can you write to inspire the reader's interests? Or can you write to satisfy their interests? And that's why we are going through this training, so that we learn how to do that. The reader should be the center of everything. If you write outside that scope, most likely your work will not be accepted. Because those who are going to review are experts in that area. So they will be reviewing the news, the writing style, how simple it is to understand, to deliver the message, and how attractive this writing style is. They have all that with them. So you should be writing to meet with the readership interests. Okay. Do you have sufficient time to write a reader impressive manuscript? That's very important. If you are going to write and to mix business with writing, it's not going to work out. First of all, the story will be broken. The smooth flow will not be possible. Yes, the creation of ideas will be fragmented. So you need to have time to yourself and probably work in a very boring environment to enable you to concentrate on writing this paper. I envy people who are businessmen and they can write a good paper if they are there at all. You need to be somewhere to keep consistency, keep one idea at a time, follow it up, dream about it, work with it. And if you can achieve that, then you will have solved the problem 50% or even more. So you must have sufficient time on your hands to be able to write a good manuscript. Okay? Yes. Now, how do you ensure that one report or one thesis generates one or more manuscripts? How do you ensure that your research is able to generate one or more manuscripts? In other words, to promise yourself of a manuscript or more, the whole thing starts before you do the research, and usually at proposal stage, writing stage. That's where you ask yourself questions, and you are guided as to whether those questions can lead to manuscripts or not. For example, those of you who were with us in proposals, we did problem analysis and it ended up with the causes. You remember primary causes? And those primary causes had no answers. So if you really teased the tree up to the primary causes, which had no answers, those kind of causes will promise you news that is not available in literature. So at that stage, you can even count the minimum number of papers that you will get from your research. Okay? And you can do it by okay, at the level, you remember those causes are turned into specific objectives. And we said at that level, turn the objective into a question. If the question has answers, obvious answers, then you are promising yourself no news in your work. In other words, those answers are asking you to apply rather than do research. But if you turn it into a question and there's no answer, for that one you can be sure you're going to get a very good publication. And we can reduce it to the level of hypothesis, because by hypothesis comes from objectives, hypothesis and research questions. Now, for example, if you had an objective like to improve agronomic value and economic performance of dash, 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 dash. Economic value will turn into a different hypothesis, and economic whatever will also be another hypothesis or more, okay? So when it comes to publishing, we turn agronomic value into a question. Does improving this and that increase agronomic value? So the answer is yes or no. Okay. Now, if it is yes, then there is no news. But if it is no, then there is likely to be news. And you ask again for economic whatever, and it will be yes or no. So from that objective, you have at least 2 papers. But you see, when we say agronomic value, we are again not specific. Agronomic value might be soil fertility, it might be diseases, so you find that agronomic value, you get several parameters that can lead you to more than 1 paper. Okay. So this one is as short as this. Yeah. So that's the end of this presentation, but we are continuing with another one immediately. Or do we have some questions as we organize to put up another presentation?
Yes, you have many questions under Q&A. You can just click on Q&A and you will see many questions there to respond to.
Which one?
Localized journal, would it require the author?
Kind of strictly. Okay, somebody is not clear about the meaning of a peer reviewer. Peer reviewers, in this case, are people who belong to your discipline. So the editors select people in your discipline to review, to assess the quality of your submission. So we cannot select an economist to review agronomy. No, we select an agronomist to review an agronomy paper. And even within agronomy, if it includes soil science, we cannot select a breeder to review a soil science paper. So that's a peer review. A peer means coming from your group. Okay. Then somebody from Ethiopia, I attended the last 2 trainings, but I couldn't. But I couldn't get the certificate. I think the administrators, the organizer. Next. Okay. What is the difference between an article and a journal? A journal is the book within which the article is found. Okay. Each journal, which is a book, contains articles. Okay. Then if I use DOI number to feed into Science Hub in order for me to be able to access information on a particular piece of article, is it also unethical, or will it be publishable during the course of the publication? Well, DOI is an identifier. For example, I don't know from which university you are, But DOI is like your name, but written on your article so that the article can easily be accessed. Digital object identifier is a number that is given to an article to enable people who are looking for it access it directly, which is different from URL. If you remember URL is associated with websites. If you put a URL, which is also acceptable, if DOI is not available, it's like you are referring me to a website in your library within which this article is found. There is a journal with your article found in your library, in your university library. Now, that's not so direct as having the number of the article itself, because when I'm searching a DOI, I'll go to the article straight, but when I'm searching and you give me URL, it takes me to the library website. So it means I have to write to the web to the librarian to look for me that article and send it to me. But with the DOI, I will be searching for the number of that article and I'll go straight to it and get it immediately. Now for URL, we normally put in bracket accessed on 5th May 2022, close bracket. Why? Because the reader of your article, which cited a paper with URL, might look for that paper and not find it. Maybe it has been taken away by the librarian and put somewhere in the archive. So when you write to the librarian, you indicate the time when that paper was there, and then they trace it for you in the archive where they put it. Okay, next. Next. Is there any difference between journal and article? I think I've already talked about that. A journal is the book within which the article is bound. So several articles are put together to get the booklet, and that booklet is what they refer to as a journal. Maybe we should stop. What next? How to get the materials of training on Google Drive like the past. I think, again, the course organizers will tell you, and I think they've been communicating all the time, how they are going to package these materials, including on YouTube, so that you directly get the voice. So I think let's get to another. We are trying to fix another slide. Questions. Three. Okay.
Hello. Yes, hope you're seeing the slide. Let's
Yes, yes.
just be it. Okay. Yeah, sort of a bit now away from the beginning. So we go to the steps in writing.
Okay. Okay. So the typical manuscript, scientific manuscript, will have all those components: the title and the running title, which is the short form of the title, appearing on subsequent pages, or alternating with the author title on different pages. And then we will have the authors with their addresses, sometimes passport photo, depending on what the guidelines of the journal will be asking for. And then we followed by an abstract whose number of words are also spelled out in the guidelines. But don't follow number of words when you are writing. In the end, you can come back and shorten the abstract to the number of words needed. And then below the abstracts, usually they are words, keywords. If the words in the title are different, And there are other words that can help us to search for this article. They are listed under the abstract. And they are also given in a definite number, maybe 5 to less than 7 words. Then the introduction, materials and methods, as usual. And we call this IMRAD. This structure is called IMRAD. IMRAD is introduction, materials and methods or methodology, results, and discussion. So that is summarized as IMRAD, structure of a manuscript. Then we have conclusions and recommendations sometimes, but in many cases, most of our work are not complete to get to recommendations. And we are going to see each of these. And then acknowledgement, and then references or bibliography, depending on what the guidelines say. Please stick to the guidelines of the journal. Okay. Now, at this stage, we are transiting from the proposal. You remember at proposal stage, we ended at data collection. After data collection, more or less the proposal ended there, except these other things like budget, outcome, and references, and so on. So we went to collect data. And now we have collected the data, and we are going to have these assumptions to ensure that we are now ready to write manuscripts. One, that we have a set of data that has been collected from a well-designed, academically premised, academically based, sound methods and procedures for the data have been collected, but following the best practices in the field, acceptable in your discipline. And the data have been analyzed using the most accepted methods, whether statistical or any other, or content analysis, whatever you want to call it. And the study followed acceptable procedures. For example, if it was an experiment, it was adequately replicated and repeated a number of times as required. For example, if it is in the field, if you do it for 1 season, normally we don't accept that as a publication, because that season is not going to repeat itself. When you go back to do the same experiment next season, you probably will get the opposite results. So because of those variations, we want you to do it more than once or twice, especially PhD. You can't do it once or twice. You have to do it like 3-4 times so that we get an average value. But at least we will say you reduce the standard deviation. That is the deviation around the mean. And you get enough degrees of freedom to work with for those of you who are doing experiments. Okay. And of course, we are also assuming that you have sufficient statistics to be able to handle results. You did the statistics last week, I think. Was it last week or the other week? Last week. Yeah. So that kind of statistics you did, we are assuming that you have it here and you can apply it and get the right results. Now, results are different from data. In the field, you collected data, but after processing the data and analyzing them using the right methods, what comes out as means are the results. Okay? And when you say mean, it means it would have been called an average, but this is a mean because it has other characteristics. It has standard errors. It can be differentiated from the other mean by certain tools like LSD, like students see what?
Core-graph tests.
Yeah, students t-test, and so on and so forth. Duncan's multiple range test. Yeah? So we call it a mean because it has other characteristics and it normally moves with them. Okay? While an average has nothing. It's more of an estimate. Okay. Okay, all those have been mentioned. Okay, we are also assuming at this stage before we write that the results you got from analysis were plotted into what we call illustrations, data illustrations. The tables, the figures, the plates, the maps, the what. Okay, now once you have those, then you can use them for different purposes as a result. For papers, we are going to pick those that are relevant to the news we have found. We will not take all of them. For thesis, you take everything because you are reporting on what you did and people are assessing the quantity and quality of what you did. But for papers, we are only interested in where there is news. If the plate doesn't contribute to that news, we drop it. Okay. Okay. If you, well, I don't have to talk about the thesis because this is not about thesis. Now, I think there's a presentation which was missing. Now, there are two ways to the results you get from your research. One, the results might have news if you prepared for that news from the proposal stage. You remember? By taking primary causes that have no answers. So there you prepared yourself for articles right from the beginning. But I know most of us don't do that. You just go and do research. And then after getting the results, then you think about publishing. And in many cases, you will have no news to publish. However, you can take each objective, and I think this is what happens. And especially those who encourage writing papers and compiling them for a thesis, that each objective results into a paper. I mean, that is redundant, because if what you are writing about has no news, who is going to read this redundant, passive kind of paper? Well, there are some journals, low-key journals, that will accept that kind of publication. So if that's what you are going to do, then you go into the objective and identify elements that lend themselves to the hypothesis. And you remember, like we said in one of the objectives, we said to improve agronomic effectiveness and economic value. So in that objective, you have agronomic effectiveness and economic value, two elements or segments. Take one at a time. Take agronomic value or effectiveness at a time and see whether you have enough data illustrations lined up behind it to constitute the beginning of a paper. Okay? I will repeat that if you had an objective saying to improve the agronomic effectiveness and economic value of sorghum and so on and so forth, we are going to sit down there. Then you have two elements or two segments. And this is because agronomic results cannot be published in an economic paper. Agronomic results will go to agronomic journals, and economic results will go to economic journals. There's no mix-up. So each one of them can be taken separately at publishing stage, so that we line up all the illustrations of the data, tables, figures that relate to agronomic value alone, and then those that relate to economic whatever, also lined up in preparation for writing the paper. Okay? But within agronomic effectiveness, you will realize that very many things will have been measured. We will come to that. I'll show you some of the, so those very many cannot be published in one paper. Again, we package some of them for one paper, then another set for another paper, and so on. The same thing with economic value. You might find that the data you have are too many, and you can split them into more than one paper. Okay? Now, at this, after selecting, say, agronomic value, turn agronomic value into an objective statement, as if this agronomic value was worked on alone as a study, and it has now a specific objective. For example, improve agronomic value of sorghum legume intercropping. Previously, we had improve agronomic effectiveness and economic value of sorghum legume intercropping. But here, now we take each one of the segments alone. Improve agronomic effectiveness in the sorghum legume intercropping. And then we will have improve economic value of sorghum legume intercropping. Okay, so those are like two papers. But as I said, within agronomic value, you'll have too many things, a lot of data, that you may have to split the data into small sets for different papers. And at this stage, I can say also that many of you, when coming to writing a paper, you take the title of the thesis and cause it to be the title of the paper. That's wrong. That means all the data in your paper will fall under one paper. And then you'll be wondering how to reduce it to 5 papers as guided by the journal guidelines. This is because you have not screened. You've not screened your data based on the writing skills. Okay. Now, you can see, you remember in the proposals, we said the objective is the heart and soul of the proposal. It is the one to direct how to write the paper, where to end when writing, and how far to go on the sides of the objective, how much to write away from the objective. So that's why we are creating the objective right now from the other main objective. We've picked out this small one to become now the title of a data set of results from all that has been obtained from the study. Okay, so we have to get the objective right now because it's the one to direct the writing. It's the one to give the direction and the scope of the paper. Okay, so after getting this with the lineup of illustrations that belong to that segment, then we are almost ready to write. Okay, and by now we are already envisioning the story, the research story we want to tell, and to begin writing the different sections of the paper based on the other table of contents. Okay. Okay. Now, after getting the objective and the data sets lined up, now the lining up is based on the sequence or the timing when each data set was collected during the, say, for example, crop growing cycle or animal growing cycle. If you took data at germination stage, that cannot come after harvest. So the lineup will be germination stage, at tasseling, at the grain filling stage, and then at harvest. That's the way your illustrations will be listed up, because you want to follow up science all the way through from time of planting to time of harvest. So you have to line them up like that. Now, after lining them up, you inspect illustration by illustration. One, for consistency of responses. Remember, you are replicating and repeating. So you want to see that consistency. If there is no consistency, probably you need to throw away that illustration because it doesn't make sense. And similarly, if the data in the illustration were not significantly different, they are not showing treatment differences, we probably want just to note that there were no significant differences in that treatment, so that when we are writing the text, we include it there, but not to include the table, which has no significant differences. However, if the lack of significant differences is in itself important, if everybody thinks there should be significant differences, but here you're obtaining no significant differences, then you probably have to put it, because that is news now, because you are now contrasting with what is known. And if I were you, I would include it, and it would be probably the reason why I'm publishing this paper. That's news, okay? Although the paper starts with title, introduction, we are starting with the results, and that's what my colleague said, that the starting point of writing a paper is with the results. Actually, even a thesis, that's what you should do. Start with the results, streamline them, write about them, which is the text surrounding each of the illustration is called data interpretation. So the section of results contains the tables and figures and whatever, plus the text surrounding them. Now the text surrounding them is better understood by readers than the illustrations themselves. So you are helping the illustrations to speak to the reader. Okay? But in doing so, we are not saying that you write the text to tell everything in the table or figure. No, that one is called a double presentation of results. Rather, the text is telling us what the table is not telling us. So for you as the author, you know more about this data that you can tell what the table is not telling the reader. That's what we want. For example, the table might not be clear on the trend of data responses across the treatments. And the table is not telling us clearly what was the highest and what was the lowest. Okay? And if the response was linear, or it was or it was tailed, or it was up and down, it's not telling us. So you, the author, has to bring those things out. And by so doing, you are also helping yourself with the discussion. Because what you are saying here now in the results is going to cause the discussion, a rich discussion, to explain those trends, to explain the number of folds or whatever increase, and the reason why you think they should be there, and so what. That becomes now the discussion, and we are going to go through all those. Okay? Now, after writing the results, just to continue with the discussion, discuss the results, then draw conclusions, and then you can go up. You can go up and give your paper a title, which is based on the objectives and the conclusion. And ideally, we are going to repeat this for each section. But ideally, when you get the conclusions, the key elements in the conclusions become the results of the abstract, so that you transfer those key conclusions under abstract, and the abstract is almost done, because then you top up with the, one background statement justifying why the study, then the objective of the study, then you summarize the key methodology belonging to that paper, leading you to the results. Remember, this paper is being pulled from the thesis. So the thesis methodology will only be in part in this paper. And as you write this paper, we request that you put away the thesis. Just pull out the tables and figures and whatever, and now write a manuscript on its own, originating from your mind okay? So that the discussion is not copy and paste from the, no. A paper, a manuscript is much more focused, and it is assessed at a very different level compared to the thesis. A thesis has a lot of space you can play around with, but not a manuscript. Actually, manuscript is normally assessed higher than a master's degree. So to the extent that usually a master's student develops the draft, which is picked up by somebody higher to measure up to international acceptable levels. Okay, so then, as I said, you go back, you give the title, you write the abstract because you already have part of it, and then you write an introduction that matches the contents, the scope, the objective, and the results of this paper. That's why I said put away the thesis or the project report, because it's going to confuse you. It has more than the objective you have here now. So write an introduction that befits, and then the methodology that will give you results, only those results that have been selected for this paper, in complete and sequential forms. And then after that, you have a draft paper. You will note that I'm not talking about citations. You can cite what you remember, and in the form you are used to citing, which might be different from what the journal will ask. Because the journal selection, as we said, you can select it at the beginning, but don't follow their guidelines, because they are going to add to tell you too many things. Don't do this, do that, italicize, put a comma this way, put initials before or in front. Rather, when writing the paper, use the style you are most used to. And then you can refine, you can customize the citations and whatever to the journal's guidelines later. And then in any case, you can't be sure that that journal will not refuse your paper. So when it refuses and you choose another journal, rather than use this customized for the other journal, you just go back, then you again fine tune it for the next journal. For heaven's sake, don't try to submit one article to two journals at the same time. Even if the other journal has delayed to publish your paper, you must write to them and ask for withdrawal. If you write 2 times and they are not responding, that's sufficient. You can withdraw and submit it somewhere else. It is unethical to submit a paper in 2 places at the same time, because each journal will involve reviewers, and some of them are paid heavily. Now, when one journal learns that you did that, I will write to the editor of that journal and tell him about the non-ethical practice. And
sometimes reviewers can be the same.
Okay, sometimes reviewers are shared by journals. So once that is known, they will drop your paper and they probably put it in some of these plagiarism cases that are cited online. Now, after putting together a draft, please give to some of your colleagues to read. Don't hide. You sit with the people in the office, they are doing similar things. I know you are wary of your data being stolen, but if you are a creative scientist, the one who steals will not go very far with what they steal. And in any case, that's not the end of the papers you are going to create. So please allow your colleagues to read through, and many of them would like to criticize heavily, to discourage you. That's okay, but when they advise, they are not telling you to take what they are saying. Take out what you think is okay and leave out the other chaff. But please don't leave out what is critical. Even if it is hurting, disappointing, don't leave it out. You have to live with it because it's still going to haunt you elsewhere. And if to co-authors, I know co-authors delay, but at least make them, take the responsibility of being co-authors. You'll get at least one responding in time. And the co-authors can be very disappointed when you call them co-authors when they really know nothing about what you are talking about. And worse still, if your paper is rejected and they know they are co-authors, they feel very bad. That's the time they will come out to say, but why did you put my name? And of course, the other way around, they will celebrate if the paper is accepted and they have contributed nothing. Okay. So this is the scheme I've been going through. Select and align results behind what you have taken from the objective. Okay. And then you can construct an objective from the data. And let me say this again. We encourage that each paper, each manuscript should be advancing one message at a time. So your objective, specific objective, should not have an and. You should not have a specific objective in a paper which has and, because that and you add will take another set of chunk of tables, figures, and whatever. So this first one beforehand, like agronomic effectiveness, will take a big chunk of tables and figures. Now, when you add and economic value, that means all the things that are behind the economic value will also be taken in one paper. Those are more than 2 messages, and we disallow it, especially for beginners. Take one message for one manuscript and let it run through the objective and guide the writing of until you get the conclusions about that message. Okay. Then you continue now with the results, do the interpretations. And the interpretation of the results of the tables and figures is to guide the reader how to understand. So the author must be in control of the reader. If you don't control, the reader is going to read what results are about differently. And that you might lose the reader along the way. Rather, it is you to control the way he's thinking and the way he's following the paper. If you can achieve that, that will be great. Because the reader will want to read until the end. But if there are diversionary things along the way, he will shelf your article and you will not go back to it. And the success of your writing is when the readers are excited with what you are writing and they are glued to read until the end. That way, you will be a very successful researcher and publisher. Okay. Then after the results, you go to discussion, as I said, then you go to conclusions and recommendations if available. After that, you can now go back to sections where citations are necessary. And you could double check to see that where you have made a very strong statement in the results and in the introduction, where you made a very strong statement, you should cite the source of that information because it is not yours. And the same thing in methodology. And here in papers, we are not reviewing literature as a section or chapter. Rather, we are using literature. Okay. You remember at proposal stage, we said there was literature review and literature use. So here we are using literature to support some of what we are saying with empirical data, with empirical information. And literature utilization is done after the document is all together. Because literature can be a preoccupation in itself, and you can very easily lose the story along the way as you engage yourself with literature. You may decide to go and look for an article, and from there, you just get disappointed, you fail to get the article, and you never come back to continue writing. So it is best to write your document first, then begin to engage literature and citations to see where should I cite, where should I not cite. And that's why we said in your thesis, you should have a chapter on literature review, so that when you are writing papers, you go to that chapter rather than go to the library or go to search on the internet, because most of your literature should have been cited already in your thesis. Okay. And then finally, of course, most of the citation software, the reference managers, for example, what are they? Zotero, there's what? Well, you know reference managers. Before writing, you set up the reference manager you want to use. And every time every time you want to cite, you give a name and the year, and probably if that's the only citation associated with that name and the year, the system will continue compiling your references at the end. Okay? But even then, you might want to double check with what the system has compiled to make sure that it has compiled it correctly and completely. But if you are writing without that software to help you, that means you are going to do things manually. So you do the citations in the text, and then one by one at a time, you compile according to the guidelines of the journal, how you should do it. Okay. I think that's all. We'll write an acknowledgement. Acknowledgement here in an article normally refers to those who funded this study, and probably those who supported the publication. Okay? Or those who read the drafts of this work. We are not saying write an acknowledgement about the farmers, about the driver, about your wife, no. That can go to the thesis if you want. But here, this is an international document. The donor will be proud to see. In fact, they will keep searching to see whether somebody has acknowledged them anywhere in the world. So the donor is key to this. And maybe somebody who provided the lab, maybe the germplasm, the seeds, which are very rare, maybe the analysis which is very sophisticated and rare, those are the people we want to acknowledge in this article. And the acknowledgement should be restricted to the results of this article. Remember, it came from the thesis, so we don't want thesis things to come to the article. For example, if you are thanking for those who paid your fees, and that has nothing to do with this article. But it has a lot to do with the thesis. So you need to know how to place whatever you are placing. Okay? Maybe what is the time now?
It's 4:30.
4:30. Maybe we go for questions to what time do we end? What time do we end?
You have like 26 minutes remaining.
Okay, so I think let's go to questions. This other part will be tomorrow.
Okay, you can go to Q&A. There are many questions there. People are still posting. Just click on Q&A and
I
you
think you
respond
read-
to their questions.
You read it for me because my site is not very good.
You can stop the screen. I can stop the screen for you, and then you see Q&A. Let me stop.
I can. Yeah, I can see Q&A, but my site is not.
Yes.
My
You
site
can.
is not.
If you are
Let my colleague come. My site is not very good.
Okay, he can
Okay.
read the response. Yeah, you
Okay.
can read.
I'm not clear with the impact factor, please. Impact factor is currently taken as a very important factor for a journal, and many institutions would require that their scientists publish in journals with impact factors. And there is low impact factor and high impact factor. Okay, but impact factor ideally is looking at a journal whose articles are referred to very many times in the world. Okay, there's a formula for calculating it, but we are not going to learn that today. Yeah. The frequency of reference to articles in that journal, if it is very high, they rate it as having a high impact. High impact because it is engaging many readers, many scientists. So the impact is high. Low, only a few are citing, reading, and sometimes they call it hitting. Sometimes they will rate the reference to the title of the articles, to the abstract, and then to reading the whole paper. Scores are given. So journals which have very high ratings, they are put in high impact factor. Now, there is a bit of politics in this game. And journals from developing countries are normally rated low in impact factor, and many of them don't have impact factors. And so when institutions say consider only impact factor assigned journals, that means the journals in Africa are being left out. I don't know whether that's enough. Okay, can we talk about predatory journals? Well, predatory is, I think it was initiated by one guy, I forget his name. Predatory, there is a thinking that there's somebody out there whom you can refer to find out whether a journal is following publication ethics or not. And that person, I don't know whether there are more now, will advise you. And most of the time, he's not going to read the journal. Rather, he will tell you about the features of papers accepted that lend themselves towards non-ethical practice. For example, they will pick something like, if a paper is accepted within 2 days and it is published, most likely a journal which does that is a predatory journal. Or if a paper is assessed for plagiarism, you know those plagiarism software, and it has more than 20% what they call similarity index. In other words, your text is more than 20% similar to other texts out there. So if a journal is found publishing such papers, will be called plagiarism. It will be grouped among the plagiarism promoters. So many journals have been identified because of that, because they have certain features which lend themselves towards that. And they don't have to have read the whole paper, but as long as the journal has those things, they will group them under predatory journals. So it is advisable to check those predatory journals list before you select a journal. Otherwise, your paper might be part of those journals, and of course, it won't be taken seriously. Or it will be taken seriously in terms of not being considered as a good paper. I don't know whether, otherwise, just Google predatory journals and go and read. There's a lot of literature on predatory journals. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Could you please share the slides for the last meeting?
But the meeting was recorded. And,
especially on literature. What is the arrangement, moderator?
the meeting was recorded, so you can just list the recording. Even better that way. You know, slides are called PowerPoint. The power is in the speech. And the bullets, you can't explain bullets, you have to listen to the speech. So we would like to encourage participants to interact with the presentations, because the sessions were recorded, they're on YouTube, and the practice of slides, when participants take slides, they actually never use them. They never just get the YouTube link and engage with the slides.
Yeah, that all these things are on YouTube. So if you can get the link from the forum, you will have all these. Okay. Explain the Shimago journal ranking. Shimago, which is this? Well, there are so many types of ranking out there. And I can confess that I cannot know all of them. But if you just search for Shimago and see what they are saying, what kind of ranking they are practicing. Is there a journal for free publication? Yes, there are some journals for free. Read the guidelines and they will tell you. Some of them are free for developing countries. They'll say if a paper is from a developing country, it's for free. Otherwise, please don't choose a journal without reading its guidelines. You will do all the customization, the what, and then find they're asking for $2,000 to publish with them. And it will be very disappointing. So read and get clearly what they are saying. And get to know how frequently they publish. They will say 2 times a year, but then for the last 5 years, they have not published. And therefore, we don't know when they will publish next. And you don't want your paper to sit somewhere for 5 years. If you are 55, by the time they publish, you are 60 or even more. And I don't think that will be good. Okay. Okay. Dear Prof, please explain impact factor. I think we've tried to do that. And you can read. These things are out there. Just read, and I can explain to you to bias you. But just read. A lot of literature is there. Even the way it is calculated. I missed response to my comment on registering via YouTube. Can I see my comment and your response? Well, if you can send it again, I don't think we will be able to trace it right now. If I have finished my literature review, but I don't have data, can I write a paper? Yes, you can write literature review. Now, the purpose of literature review is to say, in this kind of research, you have found a gap in information to explain something. So then you go out there, read all the research available, and get all the information about this gap and see whether it is still a gap. And if it remains a gap, then we want you to tell us a story that will make us agree that, yeah, this is a gap. And then you tell us what kind of information needs to be put together to fill this gap without doing experiments or whatever, but just look for information that is relevant to this gap so that you delineate it clearly, and then you tell us the implications of continuing to have this gap. And if we have to address this gap based on, again, on literature, what should we do? And in most cases, this gap is what your study is going to fulfill. So you are more or less justifying that there is need to fill this gap, but this literature review is not going to tell us about the work you are going to do. So this literature is part of your thesis, but only telling us about the gap, the magnitude, the what, and the effects on society if this gap is not addressed. Okay? And proposals of how to address it. A proposal of how to address it is actually linked with your work. You are actually justifying your work. And we can accept this paper as a publication. The only problem with the student review is that the student will be limited in information and knowledge about this work. So usually editors invite review papers from experts, people who are on top of information about the student will turn in a review paper. You're going to be asked questions as if you are not a student. That's why on papers we don't see doctor, professor. No. We don't want those titles. We want you as a person, so that when there is a review, it has to be a serious review. So therefore, when you offer to write a review paper, you have to take note of that. The questions will not spare you. Okay? But you can write and hide behind your professor, so that your professor takes it up and upgrades it to the review required by the journal. And then you will be a co-author. But some students have managed to write review papers and the papers have been published. Otherwise, usually it is the very highly experienced people who write review papers. Now, when you write a review paper, it's not like cutting and pasting literature together. No. We want to see your presence within this work, to say, so and so worked on this and got these results and so on and so forth. However, their work was limited by this and this. So and so in India also did this and arrived at this, although the study was not repeated sufficiently to reach tangible conclusions. And so you can see there is you to link up and to infer the deficiencies, the strengths, the what, and to give us the headway. So what should we do in light of all this you have reviewed? So that those links are original in this published paper. The message that is running through is yours, and that's the original work in this review paper. And that's what we want. So the more of it, the more of your views, the more original this paper tends to be. Okay? Please, moderator, you tell me the time.
Prof, you still have 9 minutes.
Okay. Then can we talk about predatory journals? I think we finished that. Thank you for the, could you please share slides? Hey, am I going backwards? Explain this.
I have responded to some of those online. I'm trying to struggle to respond to it.
Okay. We have known what articles manuscripts are, but what about papers? Well, a paper is like an article. We talk about a published article. We don't talk about a published manuscript, because in the manuscript itself, we know it's not yet there. I hope I've answered that. By having written a manuscript, you cannot claim to have written a paper until it is accepted.
Yes.
How can we be able to get best journal papers for consideration? Of course, that's why you are going through this skill. we are skilling you, but you can imagine we are starting in the afternoon to sometime early evening. That's not sufficient time. We are trying to motivate you to read, and read. And the more you read, the more you get the styles. The more you read, you get people's minds. And as you compare with the journal guidelines, you end up getting exactly what is correct. And so then you can then you'll be able to get good papers. Okay. Dear Prof, thanks. Nice presentation. Can you talk about articles in the proceedings? Well, proceedings, I think, should be the closest sister to the journals. But proceedings are reports of a meeting, normally a big meeting, conference, conferences. Now, proceedings include more than the papers that were presented. And usually the quality control is not as much as in the journal. So the papers that were presented, almost including all the good ones, the bad ones, it's like accountability for money spent. And then the business meeting, the board of whatever the society for which the conference was held, their minutes must appear in there, the attendance list and the addresses and so on. The funders, all those will appear in proceedings. Okay, while a journal is only targeting acceptable articles. It's very restricted. We specify the number of pages, the fonts, the line spacing, everything. Even if you have 100 tables and figures, we don't want that. We will say we want up to 5 figures or tables. So you have to fit your message in that small space we are giving you. Proceedings might be a bit, if you know what proceedings are, normally the books are bigger than a journal because they contain a lot of things in there. But the papers sometimes are also evaluated and they contribute towards the final grade or final score when they are assessing performance of a candidate. Excuse me. How to differentiate a good journal to others which are what? Others which are for intercepting only money. Where? Paul, can you answer to that?
Sorry?
That how do you tell a good journal from a bad journal?
There are many. A good journal will have clear author guidelines. They are not writing to pester you for publication. You know, there are journals which keep writing and they are soliciting for publication.
Those who want money and
Yes.
publish within 2 days.
Within 2 days, they are published and they are looking for money. They don't have review comments sent to you. There are so many, and sometimes these are very, very small things. So they don't have a board.
Advisory board.
And you see it in their journal. If it is a printed version, they don't have an editorial team. And sometimes it's a one-person desk. They are not regular in their publication cycle. They will say they are publishing every quarter, then they don't come through. They just wake up all of a sudden. And there are some journals, especially departmental journals, which are a one-person journal. You find that the journal has 10 papers, 7 of those are published by the editor themselves. So there are just too many things. And I think we had a slide at some point. While answering these questions, I'm seeing so many things that we need to repackage in the subsequent days and address them, because some of the things we have said them in passing, but looks like they are the very questions that are coming back. So we may have to repackage and address these issues. And we appreciate the questions because they are now giving us a direction of where to go, because our approach is not based on textbook knowledge, but it's based on an experience, a lived experience that
interaction with the audience. But you can also ask your supervisor. I think your supervisor is a good starting point because they know more about publishing. They know where prominent scientists publish. Prominent scientists will not publish in a bad journal. That one you can be sure. Okay. Good afternoon. How do we get higher qualifications through publication? Well, I am almost sure that every PhD student will be required to have at least one publication before they graduate. And they have to give evidence of that, either accepted or submitted, depending on the guidelines of the university. So it is not a casual thing that you get a higher qualification, even a master's in some universities. I'm sure some colleagues out there know this. Yeah, it's a requirement, and increasingly so. Can we, or do we write just to get high impact factor or index? Well, impact factor is both for the article and the journal. If you get high impact factor, it depends on who is evaluating your paper or your article. If that is part of the assessment, yes, they will go for it. But you should know what is behind impact factor. It's the number of people who are reading your paper that will determine the impact factor.
Still on?
What?
This one has timed out. Is it still on?
I don't know. I still have the. Yeah. Then
I think we can be closing up because now it's already time.
Okay, I think the rest of the questions we can answer. We can answer back online. We thank you for your attention. So we prepare for tomorrow. Today there is no homework because we've just started, but you can still continue sending us questions and we try to give feedback and also improve, change our slides accordingly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. So we also thank the participants for attending in large numbers. We would like now to give the floor to Professor Rogerio to give closing remarks. Professor Rogerio.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the participants to clap for facilitators that they were really great. They really took us to a really good starting point about academic writing skills. I'm sure from what we participated, at the end we'll gain a lot. I would like to thank everybody, the Rockefeller particularly, the Reform particularly, for once again joining us, the Center of Excellence in Agri-Food System and Nutrition, to provide this good quality training, which is really critical and important for us Africans. Thank you very much. Till tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And bye to the participants.